everyone, the Samsung Galaxy S20 is one of the more interesting phones from Samsung. I think it was coming at a time where Samsung had like back-to-back massive upgrades of phones, which was really cool. The Galaxy S10 brought a lot of stuff to the table, and the Galaxy S20 brought even more stuff to the table, not in terms of numbers, but the better features that it brought. And I definitely do think now this phone is kind of in an interesting spot. Pretty much got its last update, but I look at a phone like the Samsung Galaxy S20, which came out in 2020, as being a very good phone and an overall one of the most well-rounded phones that Samsung has ever made. Now, if you want to pick up some phones and buy some phones I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Samsung Galaxy S20, we were basically getting a very, very good 6.2-inch dynamic AMOLED display. This thing was such a solid, display from Samsung, and it's definitely without a doubt one of the smartest decisions Samsung's ever made. So for one, it was a 1440p display, which that in and of itself was very good. Having a 1440p display on this thing was very awesome, and that in and of itself was a very cool thing going on for this particular phone. But on top of that, you were still getting a hole punch display that we had on the previous generation, and it was a curved glass. But the biggest thing Samsung brought here was that 120Hz display. That, in my opinion, has stood the test of time on this phone for so long. And even though this phone is basically like 4 years old now, that in and of itself made this phone feel so much more modern than a lot of other phones that have came out after it. The front of this phone looked amazing. I loved it a lot. And like I said, I still think it looks very good. And even when I compare it to something like the Galaxy S23 and when the S24 comes out and I compare it against that, I'm actually still shocked by how good of a job Samsung did with this particular phone. So without a doubt, that definitely gets a thumbs up for me for sure. Now, this phone also has a couple of other things up its sleeves. So one, you have the USB Type-C port, which is great. All phones basically have it nowadays, but you were getting Samsung DeX on this phone, which still holds up very well. I'm surprised Apple still hasn't done any sort of like Samsung DeX type of thing with this phone. I feel like they should have probably done that by this point. So that again is probably just one of the bigger things to keep in mind. Samsung DeX is awesome, but you're also getting a microSD card slot on this phone as well. This is basically one of the last Samsung phones of a major, flagship kind of to bring the microSD card slot. I think it's a very cool thing. I love this phone because of that as well. The fact that this thing has like that, 120Hz display and the microSD card slot is something that is so cool, and it is definitely one of my most favorite things going on for this particular phone. So without a doubt, that definitely gets a thumbs up here. Now on the back side, you're getting that standard glass back. So, it's that standard glass back that you'd probably expect. You're also getting that triple camera setup, and I will tell you by far, this is probably one of the weirder looking backs Samsung's ever put on their phone. Although the Galaxy S21 had a plastic back, I think that phone visually looked a lot better than this phone. I don't know what Samsung was thinking here. The S10 looked beautiful. This phone does not look that good, and that's just kind of what happens when you're getting kind of an older device like this. It's not even that old. It really wasn't even that good looking at that time. When you had phones like the iPhone 11 Pro and like even the OnePlus 7 Pro from before, like those phones looked pretty good. This one, on the other hand, did not look that good, which is kind of a problem. So kind of keep that in mind. Wireless and reverse wireless charging. And overall, still a very, very good feeling phone that's well built. But I definitely would say the front of this phone is the best looking part of this phone without a doubt. Now, camera wise, this was also another interesting thing that Samsung did here as well. Another massive change. So you were getting a triple camera setup on the back and the 10 megapixel wide angle camera on the front. Now, hardware wise, basically the same type of setup as we had on the Galaxy S10. Massive upgrade coming from the Galaxy S9. And since then, this phone's camera, I would say, still kind of is about the same thing that Samsung's given us on all the baseline iPhone, on the baseline Samsungs since then. We still have that triple camera setup, still have that, wide angle lens on the front. But the biggest change and the biggest thing I think Samsung did here was giving us 8K capability. The fact that we went from 4K at 60 on the Galaxy S10 to 8K at 24 frames per second, it was a massive change. And that in and of itself was a very, very big good thing that Samsung was doing here. I feel like with a phone like the Galaxy S10, you were actually getting a very solid performing device from that particular camera perspective. Now, to kind of give you some other perspective, the Galaxy S10, without a doubt, it had a good camera, I liked it for sure, but the Galaxy S20 definitely has a much better camera here. And I will say, even compared to things like the, Galaxy S23, Galaxy S22, I'm still actually pretty, excited about the future of this particular phone because I want to see like in a couple of years how well this phone's camera holds up against phones like the Galaxy S27 and so on and so forth. Because I feel like the S20's camera is still very decent. 2020, Samsung made the Galaxy S20 and the Note 20 Ultra and S20 Ultra. Those cameras are still very good in this day and age, which is so funny. And I think that actually has a lot to do with the, software side of the camera as well. Speaking about software, this is probably the one area of this phone that is a hit or miss depending on how you look at it. So with the Galaxy S20, this one came out in 2020. no phone is going to last forever. This phone's last update was basically Android 13, so with One UI 5. Now that was basically last year. It basically got, software updates here and there and security updates here and there. But now that we're on Android 14 with One UI 6, this phone is kind of outdated if you kind of think about it. It's kind of on its last leg of software. Although it's still getting security updates here and there, we're pretty much kind of done getting software updates on this thing. Although security updates, like I said, are still coming, I wouldn't really feel comfortable recommending a phone to people if that phone is already going to be outdated by the time you buy it. So with a phone like the Samsung Galaxy S20, this is a device that you're basically going to be buying and you're basically kind of going to be like done with it per se. Like it's going to be a phone that is not really going to have like features that you can look forward to in the future. And honestly, if you buy a phone like this and Android 15 comes out and 16 comes out and you see some really cool features, I wouldn't want you to get like the fear of missing out if you don't get those, updates. So that's why I kind of recommend buying a phone that still at least has like 1 or 2 versions of software ahead of it. That's why I think a phone like the Galaxy S21 or S22 might be a tad bit better for some people out there. So kind of keep that in mind there as well. Regardless though, I think this phone is still very good from the hardware perspective. It's just the software that's kind of a little bit, messy in my opinion. Now this phone also is giving you very decent performance for how old this phone is. You're getting that Snapdragon 865 chipset with 8GB of RAM on this particular device. And the thing I will tell you, like I've told you before on these types of phones, these phones hold up quite well when it comes down to the performance side of these type of devices. Now, with the Snapdragon chipset, it's still fairly well optimized on this type of phone. And no matter what you're really going to be doing with it, you're probably going to be getting like a fairly decent performing device on this thing, which is something that I actually like a lot. So with the Samsung Galaxy S20, this is a phone that if you're doing like basic applications and like basic games, you're probably going to be getting like a fairly good performing device from this thing. Like it's going to be pretty good. And there's really not too much to kind of complain about it from like that particular perspective. But I will tell you from, a different perspective side with the Galaxy S20, it definitely has a little bit of an older chipset. And definitely in the last 2 years, Samsung and Snapdragon have made a lot of improvements with that Snapdragon chipset. So that might be another thing to kind of keep in mind as well. Like if you're in the market and you want a better phone, I think definitely going up to something like the Galaxy S21 or S22, those are definitely probably going to be better performing phones than this one. The jump from the S10 to the S20 in terms of performance, in my opinion, wasn't massive, but the jump from this particular side with these phones was probably a bigger jump when it comes down to it. So to kind of sum it up, what I'll definitely tell you is the Galaxy S20 I think is still like a very good phone hardware wise. Like there's still a lot to love about this phone. You're getting 8K filming on the camera, you're getting 120Hz display, you're getting a lot of stuff across the board on this type of phone, which is really cool. And that's something I like a lot about the Samsung Galaxy S20. My only caveat and my only con with this type of phone is basically with its, lack of, the best chipset now, which is the performance side, but also the lack of software updates that we're going to be getting on this phone. Those two things kind of irk me the wrong way on this device, and that's why I think a phone, even like a Samsung Galaxy S20, would probably be worth buying more than this thing. If you can swing for the S22 or any of the plus models of the S21 or S22, those would be probably better phones than this one. So that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.